Mad, bad, and mostly harmless, Robert Chapman's Empire of Normality and Related Tangents.
I came to it having already thought about and written about how modern economic arrangements and modern neoliberal arrangements make it very difficult for neurodivergent people because we are not productive at the rate that one is supposed to be. And we get sick and ill if we're exposed without any adjustments to a normal workspace for more than a little while.
As I have just experienced.
Exactly. I think what Robert Chapman does is give a sort of Marxian multiplied by neurodiversity account of the mechanisms that lead to this burnout. It's interesting that you read this book at this time.
Yeah, well, it's when I had time to read. I am approximately in the middle of a 1 month period of being signed off for work-related stress. Obviously, I have to be productive in other ways because my diagnosis of myself is that I have a severe case of internalized capitalism, which also made me think, going through Empire of Normality, about what it is about us that leads to the drives that enabled capitalism to emerge in the first place. There is something about a need to be useful, which I don't think is entirely the same as a drive for productivity, but I think the two are related, and I'm not entirely convinced that feeling the need to be productive is entirely caused by capitalism. I think there's something about it which is a cause of capitalism as well. And before I come back to that, can I ask you a question which has been knocking around in my head while I've been reading it from the beginning and the end, which is, what's the difference between Marxian and Marxist?
That is a really good question, and I don't know. I mean, my assumption, it sounds softer. It sounds like this is an analysis that is informed by Marxist thought rather than this is Marxist.
They use both words in the book, and I couldn't
Well,
work
maybe
out.
Marxian is more about a flavour of theory, and Marxist is more about where you're coming from politically.
Before that, I was talking about cause and effect in capitalism and
Hmm.
stuff, and you did have something that you were going to come back on.
Partly, I think capitalism happened because of the Black Death, didn't it? Because the Black Death led to a huge labour shortage, which meant a big shift in power relations between the old sort of feudal class and everyone else, because there just wasn't enough labour. So when your labour is needed by lots of other people, you can then name your price and you can move around a bit more. In order for capitalism to happen, feudalism had to be knocked out, and that was what began to knock it out.
And then, obviously, it was mechanization.
Once you become and then able to harness the power of water and drive machines, it then becomes possible to produce on a scale that was not possible before. So, in an absolute sense, the world becomes more productive and more affluent and richer, at least at the bit of it that we live in, because
Mm.
part of what was being fed into that machines, unfortunately, was human beings. Some human beings for a very low wage, and some human beings being treated literally as things.
One thing that Chapman does bring out of the book,
Mm.
in the book, which particularly when they're talking at the end about the ideas of the neurodiversity movement that
Mm.
can be adopted by and for capitalism.
And has been, and anything can. America, it's more so. Anything that's considered
Yes,
pathological is a massive, massive investment opportunity. And there is an autism industry, as I think he says.
completely.
There are all these products. I mean, you could even say things that are quite good, like weighted blankets. That's part of the autism industry, making clothes without labels.
Mm.
Whenever there's a need, there's a sales opportunity, isn't there?
Yes.
You could even, accuse my book or Robert Chapman's of being part of the autism industry if you wanted to.
Well, you can accuse any book, anything that isn't given away for
Yes.
free, inevitably becomes part of what is a capitalist system.
And also the other way that the system can sort of adopt neurodiversity is by saying, look at the opportunity you have for exploiting these people's talents.
Yeah. And then you just think, well, what is the alternative? This is one of the things that I loved about the book because
Mm.
Chapman says something that hardly anybody else says, which is the alternative to capitalism, what comes after, might be worse.
Do they mention the word capitalist realism at any point? Let me have a look. The end of the Soviet Union and other actually existing attempts to build communism also brought the rise of what the social theorist Mark Fisher retrospectively called capitalist realism. This was his term for what he described as a pervasive atmosphere conditioning not only the production of culture, but also the regulation of work and education, and acting as a kind of invisible barrier constraining thought and action that made capitalism seem like the natural and only possible way of organising the world. And I saw a very good view of it, a very good example of that this week, where Liz Kendall, the DWP minister, was talking about young people from the post-COVID generation, not realising that going to work and having to stay there all day and do your job and then not go home till the end of the job, wrongly thinking that that's stressful. I thought maybe they're not wrong. Maybe it is stressful.
One of the things that I've often wondered, being someone who's worked freelance
Mm,
for most of my working life,
yeah.
and finds 9 to 5 jobs
Mm,
incredibly difficult because my brain doesn't work 9 to 5,
yeah.
as we've discussed before, like many neurodivergent peoples, and probably like
Most
most
people.
people, like humans. I wonder if going out to work at a place at a set time is a short blip in human history.
I think it might be because people worked where they lived for a long time.
Yeah,
And actually, I think, she brought up COVID, and the thing is, that sort of revealed to us that another way was possible.
yeah. I don't think this is always inevitably capitalistic because if one was looking for the greatest efficiency, research showed that people worked longer and were more productive, most of them when working from home.
Yes.
There's something around the primacy of what we can perhaps call real estate capitalism.
Well, yes, of course. The worry was that people wouldn't be able to rent out buildings, and also what would happen to all the sandwich shops, and what would happen to transit, and what would happen to all the cars, and what would happen to all these structures and all these opportunities for profit that have grown up around the fact that people worked away from where they lived.
There are really good answers to that. It's just the sandwich shops and everything else just get redistributed to where people are.
Yes, the 15-minute city,
There's the
which
15
somehow
minute city
people managed to think was some terrible threat, which I do not understand at all.
There's something around capitalism, there's something around disruption, and there's something about the maintenance of status quo power. We put it all under the umbrella of capitalism.
Mm.
And they're all related, but I think there are things that we need to perhaps pull apart a little bit more because it works against effective capitalism, I think is what I'm saying. And there's
Mm.
something about short-termism, there's something about the status quo v capitalism, and there's something about grasping resources.
It can't just be capitalism because surely if people work at home more efficiently than they do in an office, then the answer would be for the benefit of capitalism and the generation of wealth, stay at home.
The question is the generation of whose wealth? It would
Mm.
serve the capitalist class for whom those people were working. The people whose goods they bought wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily be as well served.
Yeah.
The
Have you
moment.
ever seen the sort of online phrase that things become much clearer if you replace the word the economy with rich people's yacht money? This is going to be terrible for rich people's yacht money.
Also, it's about how
Yeah.
short-termist we are in terms of what we think of as, and I'm
Mm.
going to use the word normal. So, office work is normal.
Yeah. What I really loved in Empire of Normality is the account of the mathematical derivation and development of the
Yes.
word normal, which we talk
Yes,
about as if it's a natural kind, as if there is such
yes.
thing as a normal body.
Yeah,
No, 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 nothing was normal till the 19th century because there was no normal for it to
it was.
be.
Yes. What else is normal? Pensions. It's just like having a pension that pays well is what we all expected. That was one generation of people, possibly two generations of
It
people.
was, wasn't it? It is a fairly
That's
recent
all.
thing.
That's all. Two generations of people in the entire history of humanity. Wherever we are, wherever we were born, wherever we grew up, whatever culture we grew up in, that is normal, which is so weird when you think about it.
One of the things that came out of reading Robert's book is that I'm not equipped in many ways to be productive in a conventional way in this world. I can't do it. And it's a very hard thing to take on board. In market terms, I'm worth very little. I mean, that's just an economic fact and always have been.
Except when the market changes
Hmm.
and
If it ever
suddenly
does.
people are very interested in neurodivergence, which they kind of more are at the moment.
They are, but whatever I'm good at, and I am good at some things, it is not things that the market values. That's just a fact. I'm saying that, as neutrally as I can.
What does the market value?
Well, if I were able to write a more popular book, my books are not easy reads, are they?
No.
No, and they come from quite niche positions. And I'm not a personality. I don't put myself out there in any way. So I am mostly just the writing. Was all I ever wanted to be was just the writing. I wanted this to disappear and just the books to be left, which, assuming they don't all get pulped, will ultimately happen. But but I don't want to put myself out there. A book is not part of my brand. The books are everything. That kind of writing, you're just not, I think the word I'm looking for is not commercial.
Well, me neither,
Yeah.
but differently, not commercial. And also for me, I think because my neurodivergences are more equally balanced, I need both the bit where I'm out there kind of being very interactive, and then I need that to stop. And if I just have one or the other, I can't thrive.
I need a bit of seeing people, but it was, I think, when we were talking about literary festivals, and I worry about saying this, I will do it if it's part of my job, but not because I like it. I wanted to be asked. I didn't want to go, just like when my parents were driving me to university at Cambridge for the first time. I realized I had this sudden sinking feeling when I thought, I didn't want to go. I just wanted to get in.
So, what do you actually enjoy doing?
I enjoy writing. I enjoy reading. I enjoy being in a library. I enjoy talking to people I actually know and like. I don't mind teaching, and occasionally, once I'm in front of people, I mean, I'm not actually a bad public speaker at all. You've seen me do it. I'm fine.
Really good, actually.
Yeah.
Let's. Joanne's being modest here.
Once I do it and I've got, for the audience is with me, I can go forward. But I'm not gonna think, oh, I love to perform. If somebody said to me tomorrow, look, sign this and your books will sell really well and people will talk about your books, but never you, and you will never have to appear in front of them, I go, fantastic, and sign it.
That's really interesting from someone who puts so much of themselves into their work.
It's all I've got.
You've got a shit ton of knowledge and experience and expertise.
Well, I mean, the idea is that, the books will explain everything. Just read the book. I'm going to name drop now. This was one festival experience that I would not have missed for the world, actually. It was fantastic. Edinburgh Festival. And it was fantastic because I met Kristen Hirsch. She's fantastic and I love her. And we had just one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. And one of the things I said to her was how I'd written a memoir because we'd both written memoirs in the hope that when I met someone, instead of having to sort of explain myself, I could just go, this will tell you everything you know, walk off. And she said, you know what? Either everybody should be able to do that or nobody should, which is one of those things that stay with me the rest of my life. And when I sort of teach life writing, not necessarily for publication, but because someone is wanting to sort of express themselves, I always say to myself, either everybody should be able to do that or nobody should.